Thanks for downloading this episode from Teachers Talk Radio. You can find the full schedule and listen back to all our shows at ttradio.org. Enjoy the podcast.
So welcome to tonight's show. I'm now on the late shows on Tuesday nights. So if you have listened to me before, maybe on the Monday night, or I've occasionally snuck in on a Wednesday night, and I've now settled for the middle at 7:30. So thank you for coming and joining and listening, whether you're listening back on repeat or you're joining us live. That's great. Tonight I'm joined by Carl, who's going to be chatting to us. He's a life coach, and we're going to be talking about resolutions. I'm a big fan of resolutions. I like very much of kind of looking back and kind of having a bit of gratitude about kind of what I've managed to achieve in a year, even if it hasn't quite gone to plan, and kind of starting afresh in the new year. And I think it's about 2/3 of Brits will actually make themselves a New Year's resolution. So the majority of us will make a resolution, but not many people keep them. Carl, are you all connected up?
I believe so.
We can indeed. Thank you very much for joining us. It's not many people that manage to actually succeed their resolutions, is it?
No, it's surprisingly low. When you just said that stat about how many people set it, I got thinking the largest drop-off, I mean, a significant percentage of those people that set it won't make it to the end of Jan, but the stat that I do know, and it depends on which study and stuff, but it's give or take 8% will only succeed by the end of the year, so yeah, very low. And the majority of those people that do quit will quit by the end of this first month. So yeah, not the best stats if they're to be is there anything to go by?
No, I think it's around 35 million British adults that will set a New Year's resolution. So it's quite a lot of us. And I like kind of doing different ones. So I like doing kind of a fitness one, kind of a mind one, and then a work one. So kind of spread it across, and then maybe I'm more likely to maybe achieve one. But I think I just like the idea of kind of starting afresh, reflecting, working out on which one I'm gonna kind of improve, and having that kind of almost focus. But like you said, sometimes we don't always necessarily reach it to the end of the year. But even if we do a bit, we're kind of hopefully going to improve a certain amount. But the tricky bit is that idea of not making it through the first month. And I think you have to complete things a certain number of times to make them a habit, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much to unpack in a resolution. Like, what, is it, what the intention is, the duration, is it a year long, a lifelong changes that you just want to try something new? Is it a habit that you want to adopt? Or so there's lots of different, I guess, approaches and mindsets, and like you say, different things in different areas. And we can often start with resolutions that we think we're going to want and find out that we're not, and change. So, and yeah, when it comes to habits, which is really where I like to put the majority of the focus, because they're the steps that we need to make us, to take us towards our goals. Obviously, there's the famous 21 days, which is actually a lie. That was based on what did he do now? He was a surgeon dealing with basically the rehabilitation of patients who had lost limbs, and he found that on average for people to get to some sort of function was sort of 21 days, and that's where that came from. But to be honest, it's anywhere from 20-ish days or 16 days all the way through to 181, with the average being around 66. So my take-home message from that would be, when it comes to habits, try not to put a number on it and just give it as long as it takes.
But certainly if you can make it through January, you're more likely to make it further, by the sounds of it. And
Sure.
I know that we've discussed this a little bit in the summer for starting the new term, but I think January is a reset. And I think for me, teaching, January is one of the hardest kind of terms, because it is dark. It's dark when you leave the house. It's dark when you get home from the house, and it's harder to be healthy. And actually, there's so many bugs going around as well, and especially with kind of COVID on the increase again, I think it's really hard for staff to kind of not consider kind of get run down and exhausted and not feel their best. And I think for me, that's why kind of habits can be really good, because if you can, especially from a well-being point of view, because that's what I kind of think of resolutions and things and how it fits in with teaching, that actually if you make this resolution to yourself and create healthy habits, then you're going to be better at your job, you're going to feel more energized to be able to do your job, and it is starting that day and kind of doing healthy habits. So mine at the moment is remembering to take my vitamin D tablet in the mornings, because I'm not seeing that sunlight at the moment. And then I'm trying to make myself have greens and drink some greens every morning to try and ward off any of these bugs going around, especially with myself starting in a new school. I've got a whole load of bugs coming my direction that I'm not ready for. And then I'm also chucking garlic into every food possible. So my colleagues might not enjoy that in the staff room so much at lunch. But I'm trying to make myself do that, because I know that on the days where I forget and don't have them, that I start feeling a bit more tired and a bit more run down. And then if I go back and remember to take them for a few days, I do feel better. So I think starting your day well can be really important in terms of your mental health as well.
Yeah, it sets the tone for the rest of the day, doesn't it? Sort of what happens first thing, and there's many different ways that you can approach that. But just saying what you said about sort of this time, going back to what you said about this time of the year and the weather, and the environment is not the most supportive of change, really. And obviously, if you want to go sort of on the animalistic side of things, a lot of animals hibernate, and this is a period of I think a popular saying at the moment is sort of wintering. So you've got to the question has to be considered of, is this really the best time to sort of instigate change? It's what is this, or is this just something that we all sign up to because we all sign up to it? I think that that's definitely worthy of a discussion, but there is something special about a psychological and a chronological fresh start. And this year was particularly special, being a Monday, the first month of the first day of a new year, and it's sort of all the stars are aligned, and you do get that, like you say, that wiping the slate clean of everything. Last year was last year. It's time to crack on. But I think there is sort of this, like you say, and I think sometimes maybe not a resolution, but having a theme is a good idea. So with what you're doing, the theme could be health, and you can see that throughout the whole year. But the process, but the steps that you take to live up to that value of health, or that that theme that you've set yourself in that area of your life, can change as the seasons change, if you like. So at the moment, it's not necessarily moving forward, it's making sure that you don't get ill. And it just, that to me is quite a sensible way of approaching resolutions. Is I want to, a resolution would be, I want to be healthy, which is, I guess, more of a theme. And then aligning habits up to that, and whilst they may change, the theme itself doesn't, if that makes sense.
Completely. I'm gonna tell everyone your resolution for January, because I think there are quite a few teachers that are into this. One of my friends did it last year. You are doing an ice bath every morning for January, or every day, not necessarily every morning. But is it easier to get it over and done with in the morning?
No, I don't think it's probably the hardest time, in the sense that obviously the air temperature and the water temperature is its coldest because it's been overnight. But I think the benefit that I get from the cold water in terms of energy and mood boost, to me, is most beneficial first thing in the morning. And what I love about it, and talking about how you start your day, is that life has this tendency to throw difficult situations our way that we don't necessarily choose, and therefore, by getting in an ice bath first thing for a few minutes and choosing to do something difficult and overcoming, choosing discomfort and overcoming that sort of desire to not want to do it, it builds up this belief and tolerance, I guess, resilience, that you feel more equipped to handle whatever life is going to throw at you later on in that day. So for me, yeah, the morning is just that, and there's just something peaceful about it. I'm up super early, so there's just something peaceful about sort of sitting in very cold water. And for me, and mental health is very important. It's just a huge mental health boost, because you just go into this state of calm, where you're so intensely focused on your breathing to fight off that shock response, that everything else that's going on in the mind just sort of gets drowned out by this, overwhelming desire to just not freeze to death, basically.
I mean, I was crazy enough to do the Boxing Day dip, and actually, I don't know whether I've got it in me to do it every day, but it was very exhilarating and kind of, I just felt great afterwards. And I think it's that sense of achievement of doing something hard. Is what's the saying? Do hard things for an easy life. Easy things make a hard life. So if you actually kind of tackle harder things, then actually you'll kind of find the more difficult, when you hit difficult things, you'll find them easier because you're already used to doing hard things.
Exactly. I mean, a lot of life is the stories that we tell ourselves, and so if you choose to do hard things, and you can gain evidence that you can get through these difficult things that you sort of chosen yourself, then you're going to go into a situation that you probably didn't choose, feeling like you're better equipped to deal with it because you've got the evidence behind you that you can do hard things when the time comes to it.
And that's my thing. So one of my friends is a teacher, and she used to always work out in the mornings, and I always worked out in the evenings once my son was in bed, because that just fitted. But it was really hard to do it because I was tired by that point. And she always got up and did it in the morning, and I also always thought she was absolutely balmy getting up and working out before work. But then I started doing it. I was like, right, I'm going to try it for a week and see whether I can do it. And I did it for a week, and I did struggle, but I was like, oh, okay, I did it. So then I did another week, and then I did another week, and then I did another week. And now I'm addicted to kind of morning workouts. I think it is that thing. If I get up, get my blood going, and kind of get the energy going first thing in the morning, then I've done the hard thing first thing. Everything else in the day is kind of a bonus. And I actually feel more energized having got up earlier and worked out than actually doing it at the end of the day when I was more tired.
Yeah, there's a lot moving first thing. I tend to not like training first thing because I just feel like I'm just getting old and achy, and it takes me forever to warm up at that time of the day. But like you say, there is the other thing about advantage of getting it done first thing is, and I encourage people, if something's important, do it first thing, is because that's kind of the time where you can carve out that precious little moment before the rest of the world demands your attention. And so if you really want to guarantee to get something done before, you're pulled left, right, and centre by everything else, the morning is the time to do it. And obviously, I encourage any movement. I ran a challenge called the Morning Mile, so this is sort of the same benefit that you're getting from your workouts, just simply getting outside and moving, and starting your day that way is it's just a great way to start the day. Like you say, it sounds, I think, for people that don't necessarily exercise consistently, like, how can you feel more energized throughout the day if you're exercising first thing? Like, don't you get tired? It's like it's one of those exercise is one of those things that actually it energizes you, even though you are expending energy doing it, as you found.
Yeah, I do much feel like I've got so much more energy during the day if I've done a workout. If I haven't, I feel very kind of sluggish and less focused. Like, it clears my mind, and actually I de-stress, so I feel less stressed as the day goes on, as opposed to waking up and having worried about all the things that I've got to get done that day. I kind of feel more okay. I've got a stressful day, but I'm ready for it.
Yeah, and especially in your profession, there's a book called Spark, which is a fantastic read about how exercise affects our brains. And a lot of the studies that the book mentions are there's something called BDNF in our brains. It basically primes us for learning, and this is why in America they were doing these experiments with schools where they were doing a morning mile or morning laps at least, and they did a pilot study, and some of the kids went through the program and some of them didn't, and the ones went through, the difference in grades and everything was obviously significant enough to publish the results and everything. And it's just so good for you. It's not easy. I don't think that does it justice, because exercise obviously can be hard, and for some people it's harder, but it's the best and cheapest form of, if you want to call it, an antidepressant or a mental health promoter that there is.
I think there was a study as well, wasn't there, about children and exams and exam stress, that actually the kids that did a cramming lesson of revision before going into an exam did worse than a group of kids that actually went for a walk and had a little bit of an exercise and a de-stress before going into the exam and completing the exam. They were actually, even though they didn't get that extra time to cram the last bit of information, just going for that walk and de-stressing and going into that situation calm meant that they did better in the exam.
Yeah, and that would align from what I read in the book Spark. Yeah, that the impact it has on the brain in terms of memory, learning, de-stressing, everything. Yeah, I haven't read that study, but that would make perfect sense.
And I think it, like, I know you may not be a fan of exercising first thing in the morning, but you certainly go out for your morning walk, and that's something that teachers can do. And it is one of those that it's much harder to do it at this time of year when it is dark. But I think it's by the end of this month it's going to be 5 p.m. I think it will be light till, and then end of February it'll be 6 p.m. In my head, I've got that kind of like, I know when the daylight is coming. It's not that far away anymore. We're like getting into this month a little bit, and it won't be far away till it's light when I get home. But I think it's like you said, just getting up and having that movement first thing in the morning can really help with your day.
And I think that's the word I prefer, movement, because I just think it's more, um, it allows more freedom. So I'm not, and like I actually encourage most people to exercise first thing. I just personally I can't get on with it. But like you say, but I do have to move, and so right, like you exercise, I'll go for a long walk with my dog. Sometimes I'll do sort of yoga stretching thing if I'm feeling disciplined enough. But then I'll always do some form of movement. So yeah, it's just for me getting to the gym first thing is, and also you have to. I find that I'm most creative first thing, so it's actually when it's most beneficial to me to work, and that is something that I think a lot of people don't take the time to do, which is understand their own sort of peaks and troughs in what should we call it, the assets that are necessarily beneficial to them. So energy or creativity. I think we all sort of peak and trough at different times throughout the day. Obviously, the most well-known version of that is the chronotypes. Night owls. What's the morning one? Morning larks. Um, there's three, and then there's middle of the day, which I think is lions, I believe. But anyway, we all have different energy cycles, and so I think one of the, and unfortunately, obviously, in the society that we live in, we don't get as much autonomy as we might need to be able to sort of take full advantage of that, because obviously external things are demand. For example, if you're in a 9 to 5 job and you peak in the afternoon, you could be useless for the morning, and then you get kind of sent home halfway through when you're at your best and stuff like that. But doing your best to naturally align yourself with your chronotype and those natural energy cycles is obviously a way to sort of improve yourself, if you like, and taking the time to understand that and work it out is a really good thing to do, which is I think why I also can't exercise in the morning, because it takes me a while.
No, I've listened to the thing that mentions about I never knew that is to do with your chromosomes, as whether you're a morning or an evening person, which is why there's like some people when they live together, like later on in life, they can really clash and don't understand each other's. You don't change, but I feel like I forced myself to change in terms of getting up in the morning, but I definitely still not quite a morning person. When it gets to those holidays and I don't have to get up that early, I very much easily slip back to being an evening person. And it is that balance. But I think what helps me is kind of preparation, and it's the idea of kind of helping with your habits of leaving equipment out and leaving my gym stuff out in the morning, so I don't have to think about it. I can do it half asleep and not really be awake until the end, or making sure I don't hit myself in the face with a weight is useful. But that kind of preparation is going to be key for kind of helping with your goals.
Yeah, so what you're doing, which I think is again hugely important, is you're creating an environment that supports your goals and habits, right? So you're making the easy thing easy and the wrong thing difficult. The classic one that I think a lot of people talk about is like when I was sort of more in the personal training space, and I used to do sort of a kitchen makeover assessment, and it's like, hey, you told me that you like to binge on chocolate or whatever it may be. We all have the food that we like to sort of comfort eat on, let's say. And it's like, don't have that in the house. Make it, it's not. you're not banning yourself from eating it. If you want it, you have to go to the shop. You're just putting obstacles between yourself, or you're putting friction between yourself and the habit that you don't want, and you're trying to make it as frictionless as possible to do the one that you do. So obviously what you're doing there in your situation is you're waking up and you're basically confronting, you're removing any excuse or obstacle that would be in your way, because everything's pre-done for you. So you're also sort of using your present self the night before, when you might be more motivated, just before you go to bed. You're like, we tend to be like, oh, I'm going to wake up tomorrow and I'm going to smash a workout. And then obviously when we wake up in the morning and are tired, that motivation is no longer with us. So by prepping when you're feeling motivated, you're kind of being sympathetic towards the future you, which might not feel as motivated, and you're just making it easier for that version of you to do the right thing, which is just an awesome way to do things.
And the other kind of way to motivate yourself is to do it with somebody. I kind of have, me and my friends do the same workout, and that's kind of how we keep each other kind of accountable / motivated as kind of mums, that we can't necessarily go out and actually physically see each other. But I think that there's a lot more things going on in schools in terms of kind of, some schools have park runs actually at their school, or some schools do. My old school had used to have a run club on a Monday night, and quite a lot of the staff would run in it with the students, which was really nice. And kind of things like that. We had a ping pong after school, table tennis, and the kids and staff would play. So it's that kind of thing as well. And I'm quite open with the students. I will tell them my goals and tell them the things that I'm trying to achieve, and things like that. And it kind of opens a dialogue, because especially kind of the GCSE A-level students, because they start kind of thinking and going into fitness and being more kind of in control of that, as opposed to the younger years doing clubs and activities that are more set for them. It's the older years that will start going to the gym, thinking about kind of their workouts and things. But I think it's good to kind of show them as students that we have goals, and that we're trying to develop, and that we're not this kind of perfect teacher in front of them telling them what to do, because we've all got it all sussed out, and we've got life sussed out, and we're perfect. That life is about developing and changing and giving things a go, even if they think I'm insane because I'm going to run into the sea on Boxing Day.
Yeah, and I think it's even more important now, where there's a certain maybe unrealistic portrayal of what life is really like by a lot of people on social media. It's I think we always hold, when we're younger especially, we always hold sort of our role models in this light, right? It's like to say, sort of, never meet your heroes, because when we're younger, we do have this idea that they're faultless, they don't do this, they don't make the mistakes we do and everything. So I think, that what you're doing is great in the sense that it's sort of being open, and you're being vulnerable and being like, yeah, we've been where you are, and also that, we share the same human traits and desires, and make the same mistakes, and have the same flaws, or have had the same flaws and work through them. And I think it just obviously makes you more relatable in one sense, but it does just break down that barrier of I think it's easy today, and to be honest, I do. I'm very fortunate that while social media has been a big part of my life, I wasn't there. I was there before it as well. So I've got probably one of the last generations that is gonna know sort of both, if the before and the after, because everyone now is not. And I do think that there is, the potential to just detach from what really is real, and this extra pressure to almost portray or be seen in a certain light, which is hiding things that don't fit the narrative, or personal branding and everything. There's a lot of pressure, I think.
I think as well with the thing with social media as well is that addictive thing of scrolling, that endless scroll. It's based on that gambling loop, and even the colours that they put on alerts are based on kind of, they've researched the type of colour, the red that you're most likely to click on, and things like that. And I think that the kids especially, but I think as adults we're definitely guilty of it, is that you can end up doing it and you lose track of time, and then suddenly you've lost your time and you've not been as productive as you could have been, and especially kind of round in evenings and before bed and sleep. And I think that's something that I've noticed in the last year, that how important sleep is, especially as I'm getting older. I think when we're younger, you feel like you can survive on minimal sleep and still function relatively well, whereas if I have a bad night's sleep now, I'm struggling. And I think also with that kind of social media, I think I am seeing it with kids, especially in their teenage years, when they need more sleep to be developing and growing. If they're not getting that sleep, they're coming to school grumpy, like they're not alert, they're not engaged. And I think that's something that we as teachers as well, we need to make sure that we're doing it and looking after ourselves as a habit for us, but also something that we need to make sure our students are aware of, and that they're thinking, are they getting enough sleep to develop properly?
Yeah, I mean, sleep for me is when I look at people's sort of the areas of life. Sleep is one of the first I look at, just because poor sleep, the ramifications of poor sleep, and I'm not talking sort of chronic poor sleep, even acute poor sleep is, and by poor sleep, I think people don't understand how easy it is to fall into that category. So, for example, if you only get 6 hours of sleep in one night, your anxiety symptoms can be 33% higher the next day. That's just one night of 6 hours, which I don't think is that unusual these days. And that's an increase from whatever your baseline is. So if you're already anxious, and you get a bad night's sleep, you can see, not obviously that's a study, it's the average, but if you take the average, it's 33%. Obviously, a lack of sleep affects the prefrontal cortex, which is the part of the brain that makes our decisions, which is why we find it harder to do the things that we want to do. We become more emotional rather than rational. We find it harder to stick to habits, stick to our goals. We find it harder to learn things, or what we do learn doesn't stick as well. We tend to be more forgetful. It's just, yeah, and when you're younger, and you do tend to need more sleep because the brain and the body is growing, and they're such formative years. I do think that there should be more awareness around. I mean, it's very hard because the culture of. I think we're moving away from it. I think more awareness is still quite a young area of research, but I think, like you say, is one of the ways that it used to be when I was young. Sleep is what all the rock and roll sayings. What is it? Sleep when you're dead, and sleep is for the weak, or
Yeah.
all of these kind of things. I think that is phasing out, but there's still obviously a hangover from that. And I that's the one thing I would change is, like, honestly, sleep is just huge. And like you say, it kind of obviously, as we're older, it will impact us in different ways, and but in those early years, but for everybody, from the day we're born to the day we die, I think that sleep um, is huge.
And I think especially from like a well-being point of view, it's really important. I mean, I did a trial with Whoop, and I found that really interesting, seeing my levels when I slept. So when I was going through stressful times, specifically at school, because I really struggle to switch off when I lie down in bed. I think about all the things I've got to do for work, and I'm sure I'm speaking for pretty much every teacher out there, especially when it gears up towards exams. I used to have a book by my bed, so when I dreamed about students' work and ideas for them, I would then write them down in my book, and then go tell the students. I was like, I've got a dream, I've had an idea. I feel like Joseph in the Technicolor Dreamcoat. I had a dream. But it definitely, I think, as teachers, our jobs, we don't let go. We kind of take it home with us, and you think about it, and you think about that kid that something's happened to, or you've thought about that lesson that didn't go quite as well, or a lesson that you've got to plan or you've got to change or adjust that's coming up. It's really difficult to switch off, and I didn't realize. So sometimes my stress levels were higher when I slept than when I worked out, which says a lot, I think. But that's my New Year's resolution, is trying to work better on my sleep. And I think some of that is trying to distract myself when going to sleep, before going to sleep, so I'm not thinking about it. So I think I'm going to kind of almost combine two habits. I want to improve my sleep, but I want to read more. And obviously, if anybody is looking to join me on my habit and wants to read more, you can check out our lovely sponsors at johncampbookshop.com and use our code JCTTR2324 for 20% off. So if you want your bedtime reading, then go have a look there and see what else they've got. They've got some great books on wellbeing as well, if that's your thing like me. But I'm really struggling with that habit and how I break it. But I know that's what I need. And I think if I can crack it, then I think I will have a lot more energy and do better at work if I'm not stressing about it before I go to sleep.
It's just interesting language you use, though, because you said, I know that's what I need. But my question to you, though, is that what you want? Maybe that's why you're struggling.
It's that balance of, I feel like I work too late and then I want to relax and want to do the fun things and check out social media. But I know that I need to kind of read a book and chill out and go to sleep. I don't know, maybe it's that I remember my mum doing that, so maybe it's me thinking, oh, that makes me officially old if I go to bed and read a book.
Yeah, there could be like some rebellious side of you that's just like, no, that's what old people do, and that's not me. I mean, the other option is, I think you're right. I think we all need to have a period of time, maybe half an hour or so before we want to go to sleep, where we wind down. I just think that we need to be, you know, flexible, I guess, in the approach that we take. So I know some people that will listen to an audiobook, or they will listen to music. Some people I know journal, which if you've got a busy mind and you are trying to decompress, that would be my go-to recommendation. Obviously, reading is an option. Meditating. So it's. I think you're spot on. I think having that wind down and doing something to almost decompress from the day and quieten the mind is the right thing to do. I think but then you sort of be open to exploring different ways to achieve that goal. I love reading, so like I'm all for it. I think you've got to be careful what you read. I read a lot of non-fiction books, and I think I soon realised that actually reading about I don't know, separation anxiety from childhood 5 minutes before you go to sleep probably isn't the most productive way to go about trying to relax. So see, leaning towards fiction and things that help you disengage, but it's finding that thing that works for you, and that you want to do and enjoy, because the more you enjoy it and benefit from it, obviously the easier it is going to be to maintain.
Yeah, I struggled. I tried journaling and then I kind of fall in and out of love with it. I'm not very good at doing it, but I have done it since New Year. I've only had one day where I failed and didn't do it, but the rest of the time I have done it, and I've done it quite short. But I found that quite good in terms of reflecting and realizing the things that I have done and the things I have achieved, rather than, because I find it very easy to focus on all the things I didn't achieve and all the failures of my day and all the things that went wrong in my day. But it is slowly helping me to think all the things that did go right, because obviously I've started a new school, so I'm learning loads of new systems. I wanted to go in smashing it perfect, but I'm tripping over myself learning. It's been 6 years since I've been in a new school and trying to learn all the new styles and techniques and language that they use. I am tripping over myself and I'm getting frustrated with myself that I'm not perfect straight out the gate. But then being able to reflect on it and think about the things that have gone well, the connections I have made with students, the bits that has gone right, or the bits where I have put myself out of my comfort zone, and I now know how to do that better next time. I've clicked with it more, I think, in that respect of kind of thinking about. Before I was just being quite negative and writing about all the things that I didn't go well, but now I'm finding the positives in it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think journaling is a deeply personal experience, and there's so many different ways that you can go about it. Something that sounds like that you're kind of doing now is the 5 minute journal, which is, I mean, there's many iterations of it. I can't remember what the official one is, but one version I use, for example, is 3 wins for the day, three things I'm grateful for, and 3 lessons learned. So just bullet points. The 3 wins, like you say, is to, even on a bad day, there's usually something that goes well, and it forces me to look for that. The 3 things I'm grateful for, again, just switching into that mindset. Okay, yeah, let's say it was a bad day, but however, here's how it could have been worse. I'm grateful that I've got this, and this. And then the 3 lessons is obviously the element that we grow from, which is, you know, rather than looking at mistakes as, well, that didn't go well, it's like, okay, well, what did I learn from that experience? And that's one way to do it. The other thing I think you find, and I found this very similar to you when I started long form journaling, so what people call stream of conscious writing, which is literally when you just dump your brain onto the pages. It doesn't even have to be coherent. You just literally write and write and write. Is if it's the first time you do it, it's a bit like, imagine. I watched a video randomly on the internet today where this guy is going around and clearing up rivers. He's just taken it upon himself to clear up junk from rivers in the forest, just, I guess, to make them beautiful again. And obviously, you know, he finds all sorts of rubbish in there blocking the water. And initially, what happens is when you remove the branches and there's trolleys and all sorts, the water starts moving again, but it's very murky and it's very congested and there's all sorts of crap floating in it. But obviously, the more it flows and the faster it starts to flow as it, you know, gets moving again, the clearer and clearer it becomes. And I think journaling's a lot like that. I think when, you know, if we have had a particularly tough time, or we do tend to be someone that views things more on the negative side, is when we first start, all that negativity comes pouring out. But the more that you stick to the journaling habit, and you know, the longer that you keep writing, essentially you just run out of things to be negative about. And just like the water in the river kind of gets clearer, you'll notice that your words, and maybe this is what you're experiencing now, but your words and your thoughts will just tend to switch to more either neutral or positive things. So my encouragement to you would be is to be, just because it doesn't come across as negative, maybe that's just what you need, is just to get all of that out of your head, like kind of clearing the blockage, if you like, so that everything else can come flowing through.
And as you're saying that, I'm just thinking. So this is, I had Ben West, who's a mental health advocate, on a show just before Christmas, and we are talking about kind of mental health support for students in schools. And I feel that this is something that we should be teaching kids about. Teenage children that don't want to talk to each other, but have all this teenage angst inside them. Like, actually, we should be teaching them to kind of do this, to kind of get it all out of their system, to kind of give them tools and strategies to be able to reflect on what's going on. Especially, like, I think, like you said, there's all this social media pressure on them to be perfect and have everything sorted and be happy all the time and celebrating and promoting their perfect lives, when actually we need to be teaching them how to kind of deal with the negatives, be really grateful for the things that they do have, and then they can see the positives after. And I think that's also goes for us teachers as well. We quite often give everything to the students and we don't necessarily look after ourselves. And I think that's where teacher well-being is done properly. If you can get your teachers to really think about themselves and look after themselves, and kind of give them these tools. I remember doing it on a training day quite a long time ago. It was about it was something. Oh, what it was Suzanne Cole. She talked about sharpening your saw, and it's like you can't. How long is it going to take you to cut a tree if you've got a blunt saw? Like, you have to look after yourself and have a sharp saw in order to be able to actually cut the tree most efficiently. And that's where it goes for teachers. We have to look after ourselves. We have to have a staff body that's not kind of going to burn out because we're not sleeping properly, because we're thinking about all the things that we've got to do. And I think as a collective, especially with everything that happened last year with Ruth Perry, we need to look after each other as a teaching community and make sure that we are kind of doing everything we can to see the positives and just give ourselves a bit of slack around all the negatives, because we'll quite often I think we as a profession very much see the negatives, but yeah, I think seeing the positives and the things that you do is really important to kind of growing and succeeding and de-stressing.
Yeah, a really cool, for anyone listening that's going through a maybe an overly self-critical or self-judgmental time, is an exercise that you can do, and it is a journaling exercise, but it's called a letter to yourself. And I think that it's one of my favorite exercises. And you basically take a situation in your own life, something you're going through or have recently gone through, and then write a letter to yourself from the perspective of someone who really cares and loves you, whether it's a friend or a family member, and write from their perspective, what would they say to you, and then put it aside 50 minutes and then read it back, because we are more often than not, we speak to ourselves in ways that we would never speak to anybody else. And this exercise just forces you to come to from the perspective of how a friend would speak to you, and then it just highlights the difference between, it's just a great exercise to self-compassion. And I think that's what you said. And then obviously there is that shared compassion as a profession that you can have, which is, it can often feel in this world like, we're the only ones going through it. Our situation is unique, and it's only us that feels this way. And actually, if we are more vocal and outspoken in how we feel, not in a vulnerable way, not in an attention-seeking way, just if we are more vulnerable and honest and open with each other, we'll realize we've got this shared experience. And not only does that make us feel sort of less picked on by the universe, if you like there's something that we've done wrong, but it also more than likely will, when you put many people together, sort of make things easier, but make it faster to work towards some sort of resolution.
Bet UK is just 2 weeks away. Are you ready to join 30,000 attendees, 600 plus exhibitors on 7 content stages from 120 countries, and see Louis Theroux, Dame Darcy Bustle, Jason Arde, Laurel Kana, Baroness Floella Benjamin, Dan Fitzpatrick, Mr. PICT, and so much more? I might need to bring my trainers. The best part? Educators go free! Get your ticket now at uk.betshow.com/visitor-registration.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishing professional development books and resources to support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Have you checked out their latest releases? Use the code JCTTR2324 for 20% off your order. Don't miss out. Visit johncattbookshop.com to explore their full range of titles and advance your own professional development today. Happy reading.
Introducing Eton X from Eton College, a diverse range of quality online courses enabling young people to aspire and excel. Designed for self-study, these web-based courses empower your students with essential leadership, communication, and academic skills for success at school and beyond. Our Study Skills course sharpens their learning abilities, while the AI Fundamentals course equips them with vital digital know-how in a fast-changing world. Other popular courses include verbal communication, critical thinking, writing skills, resilience, creative problem solving, and many more. Offer the Eton X curriculum in your school for free. Visit etonx.com to find out more.
It's quite interesting what you said, because we had I was in staff room today, and some teachers were talking about a teacher that I didn't know. He was a head teacher that was known from one school, that had moved to another school, hadn't been very long, didn't kind of gel with the trust, and had left and gone somewhere else. And they were talking about the fact that he'd gone, and they all kind of went, we need to know where he's gone to so we can send our children there, because I really rate him. And I was like, for him to have moved schools to a new school, and for it not to be his kind of school and gel, and to have left, like, he must be mentally, that's quite a really big decision to kind of leave and things. I was like, I wish he could hear your conversation. I said it to them. I was like, I really wish he could hear you talking about him and how amazing he was for previous children and that you've had, and how much you would like your children to be in his leadership. When he's in that state where he's probably, that's kind of quite a big thing to kind of leave a school after a short amount of time under those circumstances. And one of them went, actually, I do kind of know where he lives because I've driven past him. I could drop a letter. And I was like, I think you should, because I think that's the thing. We're all very good at kind of burying our heads and getting on with it. But actually, it's really important to do those things. And I love it. I'm old school. I like writing thank you cards and thank you letters and stuff. And I'll make my son do all his birthday and Christmas card ones. But my school actually get the kids to write thank you cards, and they give it to a teacher at the end of each term. And there's a teacher that only started a few weeks before me. He's covering maternity leave, and he's deaf, so he has a signer in his room. So it's quite a difficult situation for himself to teach. And one of the kids wrote a letter, because he'd only been teaching them 2 weeks, and wrote him a thank you letter just saying how much he's really enjoying his lessons with him and how much of a difference it's made. And like, he was so excited to get it, and he showed it to me on the first day of teaching, like, look at what I got from one of the kids. And I think it is that well-being thing within schools of kind of giving yourself slack and seeing the good that you're doing, but also telling each other, and it being this kind of community thing that as teachers we're really appreciative of each other and we celebrate each other, but also getting the kids to do it as well, and to realize how lucky they are to have such great dedicated teachers. If you can get that ethos in your school, then you're sussed.
Yeah, it's just a pretty. I wonder why we're so bad at that. Like, what you know, I was just thinking it through as you were saying that. You know, like, I think maybe it's because we just assume that what we think about somebody else, they already know. Do you know what I mean? You know, like,
Yeah.
I mean, you hear sometimes you hear people say it's like you already know this, but and it's like actually, you know, we don't know that. That's a huge assumption on our part, and that person could be insecure, or you know, it could be. So sometimes, you know, it is nice when someone just turns around. It's just like, just to let you know, I really appreciate everything you do for this, and it can make a huge. It costs us nothing. That small compliment, that small act of kindness, but it can make a huge difference. And I think the reason that we don't, and this is a guess, obviously, is that we assume that they already know how much they're appreciated. When the truth is, you know, probably don't. You know, because we know that we don't go around paying. You know, I mean, I don't know about you, but people don't randomly come up and say nice stuff to me. And so, why would the person that we're sort of refraining from saying something nice about, why would people randomly say it to them? And we assume that people do, but then it's just, yeah, it's such a nice thing, isn't it? You know, and I think, you know, thank you letters and so much stuff gets left unsaid. And I often think that there are times when something maybe happens and you're like, that's when you realize you're like, oh, you know, I wish I'd got the opportunity to. I believe it was Seneca, Seneca or Socrates. I'm pretty sure it was Seneca. The philosopher, and it's a bit morbid, but the Stoics tended to be that way. But it was like he said, every time you put your daughter to bed, kiss her and let her know how much she's appreciated, as if it's the last time you'll get to do so. And obviously, the point he's making is like, if it's something that's important to you, you need to do it now, because you just don't know when if this is the last opportunity you'll get. So I think we should be a little bit more kind, and like if we feel that someone has done something that's sort of deserving of compliment, we should say it.
Is it just a British thing, like when you apologise when they bumped into you, kind of thing?
Yeah, maybe it is. It's like, I'm really sorry to disturb you. I wanted to pay you a compliment, but I feel that I'd be intruding if I did. So I'm actually just going to refrain from doing so as not to embarrass both of us.
Yeah.
I think I'm all for it. Not random acts of kindness as such, but I think that, you know, it is, and you know, even just if someone was wearing a cool jacket in the supermarket, I guess it could get a bit weird. I don't know where you draw the line, but I just do think that we have got to this point where we just no longer, it's sort of, well, I guess that's even a point that I'm trying to make. Like, why has it become weird to just say, not in a weird way, but just to say nice things about people with no other malintent other than to compliment them, you know?
Yeah.
Maybe that's just me.
Maybe that should be someone's New Year's resolution, to give more compliments, because I think like it's a thing, isn't it? Apparently there's a study is that people that are more kind are more happy. So if you're more kind to people, then you're generally more happy. I like that stat.
Yeah, that's a real thing. That's the you know, sort of the more you give, the more you shall receive, kind of thing, for sure.
If anybody listening wants to tell us their New Year's resolution, you're welcome to call in. You just have to hit the mic button on the bottom left-hand side, and you come tell us your New Year's resolution. We'll give you some tips to help it be successful.
There's got to be some good ones out there, hasn't there?
Yeah, I have. I secretly have asked my New Year 10 tutor group what their New Year's resolutions are. I disguised it. I learned a lot about them. I learned what their favourite subject was, what their least favourite was, where they want to go to college, what they want to do for work experience, and what they want to do. And then I asked them what their favourite thing about Christmas was, their least favourite, and then what their New Year's resolution is, and what habit they would most like to change. So bear in mind, this is from some kind of 14, 15-year-olds. I've got a few that are try and focus more in lessons. I think that's just going to be a general one in terms of kind of just thinking and focusing a little bit more. There's a few, obviously year 10, they're going into kind of starting this ramping up of exams. I've got a couple that are past my mocks and that are do more revision. So I think they kind of come hand in hand. How would you build up like the habit of kind of doing revision, especially if you're like after school and you're tired? I guess it's kind of a bit, some of it will be kind of, like we said, setting up their environment. So making sure they've got a workstation, potentially a revision schedule. But is there a way to kind of help them focus more, or kind of ways to kind of schedule themselves to have better productivity?
Of those two resolutions, I definitely prefer the revise more rather than pass my mock exams, because obviously one's an outcome and one's a process, and we can't really always control the outcomes. But that revision would lead to, anyway. That's just my mini rant over. But I always prefer process goals to outcome, or focusing on the process. I think hydration and food. Nutrition does play a role in productivity. We don't want low blood sugar. We don't want to be dehydrated. That's going to prevent focus. The other thing is obviously environment. So if you are working or wherever you are studying, phone away, or if you need your phone, blocking. I have an app called OneSec, which blocks me out of social media apps for blocks of time. You can predetermine how long you want those blocks to be. So when you basically can't access them, there are other web blockers. One's called Freedom and stuff like that. Making it difficult to get distracted. If you like to, if you're in a noisy environment, maybe whacking on some headphones and having some background noise. I quite like, when I'm writing, I quite like instrumental music. I can't have lyrics because that distracts me, but just something to drown out the noise. If for example, I like working in a cafe because that background noise actually helps me. But if it's distracting noise, like other people in the house, then something to block that out. And I would say I'm quite a big fan of sort of a form of time blocking at the moment. I don't know if you've heard of Pomodoro, which is working for 25 minutes, relaxing for 5, or resting for 5, and then doing that, and then taking a longer break after 3 or 4. So you're kind of having a deadline, so you don't feel like, oh my God, I've just got to sit here for the next hour and a half, where you can say, actually, I've just got to do 25 minutes, and I can get up for 5 minutes, then do another 25 minutes, and doing it that way. It takes a lot to be able to sit down for 90 minutes straight and get into this kind of deep state of focus. So breaking that down into smaller study chunks could be beneficial. If you're someone that's really easily distracted, breaking it down even further, maybe to 20 minutes, 15 minutes, and could be, but essentially breaking that longer term goal. If your goal is to, let's say, study for an hour and a half or an hour, breaking it down into more manageable chunks. And then what you might find is, as your focus or your ability to focus increases, you can lengthen the amount of time. But the big thing, I think, for exams, and again, I was fortunate here that social media wasn't around and everything, so I think I probably would have failed most of my exams if it was, is removing distraction, making sure that your environment is conducive to studying, making sure that you've had some food or some and the one thing that I would do at the end, actually, just to really sort of finish the loop, is, if you want, is have a reward.
Yes.
So put something at the end of so a traditional Pomodoro is 4 25-minute blocks, and then you get a half an hour break. I mean, you don't have to stick to it like that, but let's just pretend that that's the situation that we're using. So it could be, after I've done an hour and a half of studying, I'm going to watch an episode of, or play whatever on the Xbox, or go onto Instagram, or chat with my friends on WhatsApp, whatever it may be. But you need to reward the behavior that you're trying to encourage, because it sounds so simple, but it's the brain is then going to get wise. Like, okay, well, if I do X, then I get to do Y. And there is a certain amount of discipline in enforcing that yourself. But you can then, obviously, like you said earlier about accountability, is you can get something that's like, look, don't let me do this until I've done this, and that person will hold you accountable. So it's like, if I text you before 5:30, don't reply. and then
Yeah, yeah, I was going to say that if as kids you got them to kind of focus in little revision groups and be like, even if they had like their group WhatsApp and they went, right, we're all going to revise for an hour, no one's allowed in here until this amount, otherwise you all owe us a bag of sweets tomorrow or what have you, and therefore they're like and do it together, and then they don't have FOMO that they feel like they're missing out on all their friends chatting or doing something, that if they go and kind of do this and kind of do it as a group thing, that they're going to succeed in their revision, can be quite a fun way of doing it. I think that's the thing, because the stress of GCSEs is massive, and I think actually if you can make revision kind of take the pressure off and do it in that fun group way, even though they're doing it individually, but it's like, right, we're all going to revise for an hour and then we're going to reconvene and we'll all have a gossip or something, that can really help break it up and have that camaraderie that's going to feel like you're all doing it together.
Yeah, we do it as adults, right? Like, well, look, let's all go to the gym and meet up. We'll do this class, and then we'll sit down and have a coffee or a protein shake afterwards. It's a similar concept, but I think there is that, like, study groups. Like, look, we'll all go to the library for an hour, or that's what I used to do. Like, we'll go to the library for an hour, and then after we've done that, we'll go and do this. And then, like you say, not only are you eliminating the fact that there could be something more appealing that you're missing out on, but you're holding each other accountable, and then, you know, probably making it more enjoyable, which is a big part of it. I mean, it's, you know, when I say it might not necessarily be enjoyable, but it could be more enjoyable. But then you're also sort of celebrating, rewarding yourself with the people that you want to be with. So yeah, it works on many levels. Yeah, and I don't know what, I think we talked in the summer, didn't we? We mentioned caffeine. But you know, if it is, I would try and limit caffeine, especially at that age.
Monsters and Prime, among other energy drinks are available. They're obviously going to be having massive effects. I didn't realize to how much extent, because I was listening to a podcast about sleep, because I'm doing that typical thing where I'm researching about sleep rather than doing the actual thing of going to bed early and sleeping. But I didn't realize how long caffeine kind of stays in your system. And I think as teachers, I'm the exception to the rule because I don't drink caffeine. But a lot of teachers you see constantly filling up their coffee cup for their duty. But it stays in your system quite a long time. So it can be really affecting your sleep in quite a massive way.
Yeah, the half-life's around 4 hours, I believe. So, like, if you have a monster, there's still going to be some of that, you know, lurking around late into the afternoon. And I think the argument that a lot of people have is that, well, I drink a lot of caffeine and I'm fine. I think we just get used to how we feel, and it becomes normal, even if it's not. You know, our body is very good at adapting. I know that when, you know, I have no intention of giving up caffeine, but I do caffeine resets of up to a month. And as sad as it makes me to admit, I do tend to feel better and sleep better when I don't consume caffeine. So I think, you know, whilst I drink caffeine now and I sleep okay, that's not to say that I wouldn't be sleeping better if I didn't have caffeine. We just basically build up a tolerance and we get used to how it. And you get the same argument with sleep in general, like, well, I only have 5 hours and I feel fine. It's like, no, you just got so used to feeling bad that it feels fine to you now. And if you actually had a few good weeks of good sleep, you'd realise how unfine you were. Unless you are a scientific anomaly that, you know, goes against sort of what we know about sleep. If you're lacking sleep, then it's you getting used to it rather than you being able to do it well, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So my next student, who is already instantly become my favourite student, as her job aspiration is to become a teacher. But she no, they're all equally. I love them all, unless they want to be a teacher. But they've put the things that she's kind of worried about and wants to change. So she's very anxious and struggles to focus, but wants to become better at talking more confidently. So I was like, oh, she's done my favourite resolution as well. Because I think as a teacher, I get very anxious about everything. But talking confidently is something that I developed when I did my masters, and I had to present my work weekly and get absolutely destroyed, and then go again the next week. And that built up that confidence to be able to stand in front of people. But actually, like, to be able to talk confidently is a skill, especially like with that's why oracy is kind of that big buzzword of last year, and kind of increasing kids talking, because majority of them are kind of texting each other. They're not really actually talking, especially not necessarily talking in public, and talking in front of a group of people is kind of a different thing. So like, I guess it's kind of two strands, isn't it? How do you deal with kind of getting rid of the anxiety, and then how do you kind of become more confident?
So I think you've got to go with exposure therapy, that sort of approach. I don't know, are you familiar with exposure therapy for anxiety?
No.
So essentially, you take it sounds horrible, but it's very effective. Which is essentially, let's say that if someone's scared of spiders, what you might do is you'd put them outside a room with a spider in it, and then you'd put them in the room with the spider in a box. And what you do is you gradually increase the exposure that they have to the thing that they're scared of. But it's eliminating long-lasting phobias in a matter of weeks, sometimes hours. Um, because obviously the more you're exposed to it, the less effect it has on you, because a lot of this is in our minds. So with the speaking situation, like you say, like you did, if you can jump into the deep end and just stand up and accept that you're going to be. It's harder when you're younger, but just accept that you're probably going to be bad to start with. But the more you speak in front of people, the better you're going to get. Or you can do the gradual approach, which is deliver a speech to two of your best friends, and then add in a few more friends and build up to more and more people, and then do that. And I think with the confidence, I just think that would naturally be a byproduct of practicing speaking in front of people. You can go the fake it till you make it, and I'm not a big affirmations manifestation person. I think that does work for some people. Research shows that it tends to work for people who are already uh, confident about themselves, and people who are actually very, sort of insecure tend not to believe affirmations, and it makes them feel worse. So I think you do have to tread carefully with the recommendation of them. But for me, confidence is a byproduct of like I say, so let's say that you stand up in front of people, it's not comfortable, but you stand up in front of a group of people 10 times. You've got 10 situations, 10 pieces of evidence where you can do it. And from that, you're naturally going to start to feel more confident. And then the more you do it, the more you're exposed to feedback, or being willing to ask for feedback. And like you said, you might get that situation where someone comes up to you afterwards and just offers you that compliment. Like, look, I really enjoyed that. I think you've got to not expect that. But when you do get it, that's going to be a huge boost.
I find that anxiety thing with the idea of putting somebody in a room with a spider until they get used to it really interesting, especially from an education point of view. We've got a massive thing with kids and anxiety in getting them to attend school since kind of COVID. And I think that idea, especially, and more so as well with kids getting them into an exam room. So like, I find that a really interesting concept. I would love to know if anybody out there want to tweet me, tell me whether you do any of this. But is that something that actually we could be doing with anxious kids in terms of getting them into exams? If we actually just sit them in the exam for an hour on their own, and then the next day it's a couple of hours, and the next day they spend all day, and maybe they have a couple of people in there and they have a little group of them, and we build it up that way. Are they then able, when they hit the summer, be able to do exams all in one room? I know quite often we do mocks and kids will go in there, but I've seen that even some kids aren't even getting into mock exams. They just physically cannot go in through that door, or they have a breakdown kind of trying to get into that door, and then don't come in for a few days and kind of miss the other exams. So from that respect, that idea of breaking that down in terms of how it could really work in teaching, if you have those anxious children, especially those ones with exams, that could be quite an interesting thing to try to get them used to kind of exam rooms, rather than just going, oh, there's a mock, you've got to be in there, or now it's the actual thing, go. Would be quite interesting to see whether that has a positive effect.
Yeah, it would be interesting.
We've got Paul. He's written in his New Year's resolution is the daily battle of getting the kids out on time, but also being able to give out the letters, the daily prayer, tidy classroom, etc. So that end of day kind of finishing on time and getting everything done. Oh gosh, I know that feeling. And it's that that and then to feel like you're leaving your classroom like you've actually finished everything and you can go home and relax, but that kind of last end of day rush to try and get everything done before you go home is horrific. Any tips for kind of getting everything kind of done and sorted and organized? How any tips for kind of organizing that and timekeeping?
I think there's two elements to that I can see. I think you have to work backwards. So you almost have to, if it takes half an hour, maybe allow 45 minutes, and 45 minutes have some sort of alarm or notification system that's like, right, we need to start the wind down process. And I say the reason to give a buffer is because everything always takes longer than we think it's going to take, even if we've got a plan to make it take as long as it takes. For example, it's the way that it works. And then my last piece of advice, which probably isn't the most helpful, or at first appearances isn't the most helpful, but is the acceptance that sometimes not everything is going to get done. And therefore, what I would do is I'd have a hierarchy of systems where it would be like, okay, so the most important thing that I want to make sure that's done is this. And then the next most important thing is this. And then the next most important thing is this. And so therefore, you know that, okay, at the end of the day, even if you haven't got everything done, you've got the most important things done, and then almost having to sort of make peace with the fact that today just didn't go my way and I'm not going to get everything done. But if your criteria is, at the end of the day, I want to make sure everything is done, then you're setting the bar at perfection, and anything else is unacceptable. So almost having that tiered system that allows for a little bit of, not everything is going to go my way every day, and therefore, I'm okay with that.
I'm very guilty of doing the easiest things first instead of the important things first, and then I end up doing the big important things in a rush at the end. So I feel a bit seen with what you've said. That actually, I just need to start with the important things and get them done, rather than doing the little bits that I quite enjoy that aren't quite as important.
But you can do that. The way that you do it works. Like the way that you do
it doesn't.
But if something takes like 2 minutes, you're like, okay, I'll do that. And then what you're doing then is you're getting a psychological win. So you're like, right, I'm off to the races. But then what you can't do is continue to do the little things that don't matter. You know what I mean? So like you have to be like, okay, these 3 things are going to take me 2 minutes each. I'm going to do them, bang, bang, bang. Now I need to do the big thing. But what can happen is what you're kind of, I think, getting at, instead of doing that, is you're using the small things as a means of procrastination on the big things.
Yeah, to feel like I've achieved something, even though it's not the thing that I should have achieved.
Yeah, and that comes down to like the busy versus important, or busy versus productive.
Yes.
Like you've got a lot done, but you've not really moved the needle. Whereas actually, if you'd got less done but on more important things, it would have had more of an impact. But I also think, like I say, going back to that self-compassion of it sounds like, obviously I'm not doing this what should we call it, like a lockdown process or like a shutting down process.
End of day.
Yeah, it is there's a lot going on, and a lot that's out of your control, and I think there is that you need that element of self-compassion, which is like, some days you're going to absolutely nail it, and some days you're not. And the days that you don't, is being, okay, what didn't work, so that maybe it's something that I can fix, so that I can get that right tomorrow. If it's something that you can't fix, making your peace with, okay, today didn't just go my way, but then not letting that deter you from trying again the next day. And I just think, that some days are going to work out and some days are not going to work out, but as long as more days work out ultimately than don't, then that's progress.
Yeah, I quite like the thing of giving yourself a time that you have to leave as well, because I'm very much on the days where I'm at school and I'm like, right, I don't have my kid tonight, I can stay as long as I want, I can get everything done, but I'll end up being there hours later and still not really got everything done that I wanted to get done. But I've spent all these hours, and then I go home and then I haven't got the downtime and I'm really tired. I find actually when I set myself, right, everything has to be done by this time, and then I go home. If it's not done by that time, it doesn't get done. It moves over tomorrow, because otherwise then you end up in that cycle, especially as trainee teachers. If you'll end up in school and staying at school, give yourself a deadline, or that Friday, make sure you leave at 3 o'clock and you're out at that door. Like, there is that balance. You've got to look after you and your health, beyond drinking greens and eating garlic. You need to kind of think about your mental health and not burn yourself out early on. And I think that's the thing with teaching. It's this job that you can keep going and going and going, and there won't be enough hours in the day, and there'll always be things to do, because we're all perfectionists, and teaching workload is just massive, and we could always be doing more to help X, Y, and Z. And we need to actually do what we can do in the hours that we get paid for, and make sure that we're not burning ourselves out by adding extras onto our workload because we feel like we have to, not because we should be doing it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, you can push yourself that far, and you can tell yourself that you've got to do X, Y, and Z, and you can have the perfectionist mindset, and you can aspire to achieve everything. But ultimately, if you don't look after yourself, you can do absolutely nothing if you're at home from mental exhaustion and burnout.
I've only got a couple more left on my students. They all kind of did quite similar resolutions. I've got a few that have actually said they'd like to go to sleep at a scheduled time. I don't know whether they've not been specific. They've not said early, just at a scheduled time.
The best thing that you can do for sleep is consistent bed and wake time. So to be honest, it doesn't really matter what time it is. If they stick to a consistent bedtime, that is one of the best things that you can do to improve your sleep. Sleep regularity, because our circadian rhythm is obviously hormonal. Consistency of sleep schedule is huge. So that's actually a really good. They probably don't know. Maybe they do know that, but that is, yeah. I mean, obviously, ideally, it would be at a sensible time and consistent. But even consistent is a good habit.
They're wise before their years.
Yes.
The one that you told me the other day, actually, that has started working for me, and I quite like it, is the fact that you can actually tell your phone when you want to go to sleep, and it will start. It turns off all of my notifications and stuff, and all of my apps, all the little notifications, because I'm one of those awful people that doesn't open messages and stuff, but they all disappear, and I quite like the fact that I don't know who messages me, but it was putting it into that sleep mode, or telling my phone and every night it does it at the same time.
Yeah, and people knock technology, and technology can really disrupt our sleep, but if we leverage it to our advantage, we can use it to help us as well. I mean, my phone does the same. So at 9 o'clock, my phone will go into complete lockdown mode, do not disturb, all apps are turned off. I'm technology is, unfortunately, it's like, people have their thing, that is mine. So in about 20 minutes, all my lights are going to go to dim and to like the nighttime settings throughout my house. And I have a proper, I have my own little shutdown sleep scenario going on. And rather than relying on me to remember at 9 o'clock to do this, I've set up a series of automations with my lights at home and my phone that basically it removes that decision out of my hands and makes it for me. So yeah, little things like that. In the morning as well, you can have it. There's a really good app called Sleep Cycle that wakes you up in the ideal stage of sleep in the morning and stuff like that. So there are things that there are ways that you can use tech to benefit you. Obviously, the one thing again that I would recommend for a lot of people is not taking your phone to bed. So you're not tempted to check it last thing on night or first thing in the morning. But obviously, I appreciate a lot of people use it for their alarm. So if you do that, either have it in sleep mode like you have, or even put it in airplane mode so that there's no chance of things coming through. The one thing I like about do not disturb mode, though, for a lot of people who obviously have friends and family and stuff, is what you can do is you can designate a number. So if your phone's in do not disturb mode, it won't let phone calls through unless the designated number, or any amount of designated numbers. I'm not sure. I don't think it's a limited amount. But if they ring you twice within a certain time frame, I think it's 1 or 2 minutes, it will then override.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
Yeah, so if there is an emergency, because obviously what you don't want to do is put your phone in airplane mode and then you're lying there in a huge state of anxiety that something could happen to someone you care about. So maybe for some people, obviously the do not disturb feature with allowed numbers just allows for any emergencies to come through. But you don't need to be. I know it's tempting, but it's such it's a really risky game checking social media before going to sleep. And what I mean by that is like you can see something that really winds you up like just before you go to bed, and obviously that's going to wreak havoc on your sleep, because you're not going to then be able to just switch off and be like, oh, I'll deal with that tomorrow. You're going to want to reply. You're going to want to engage. You're going to feel angry or whatever emotion it sparks in you. So I think not putting yourself in a situation where that's a possibility is a good way to go. Like you say, like you're doing reading or journaling or meditating or whatever it may be.
I've got another one. I think I like that's my phone has just literally beeped and gone, don't forget you need to start getting ready to bed at 9:30. So it knew we were talking about it. So one of them said to be more productive. I think I quite like that as a year 10 kind of deciding what they need to do, but I feel like they need to be I'm quite a productive person, so I quite like that. But I think that is a little bit linking in with what we've done, is that you get drawn into social media and you become unproductive. But I think kind of like you said, like focusing, because you can always do the opposite of journaling for that one, and write down at the start of the day the things you want to try and achieve, and kind of almost do your to-do list at the start of the day. Because I have a to-do list book, so I find that actually rewriting it every couple of days and refreshing myself out kind of makes me be a little bit more productive. That I'm like, right, this is what I need to get done, and it kind of, by writing it out, helps me be a little bit more reflective of what I need to get done.
Yeah, I mean, if you've got a to-do list book, I would argue that it's not a to-do list.
It's my teaching to-do list.
Yeah, I mean, in that situation, I think what could be beneficial is like making a to-day list or a focus list and choosing 1 to 3 things, and then if you do those 1 to 3 things, adding something after the fact. I even at one point would only have one thing on my to-do list each day. When I was really struggling with my focus and productivity, I'd be like, right, I've got to pick one task, but this task, and my criteria was, what's the one thing that if I do today, by completing it, everything will become easier or unnecessary. And that would get me to really hone in on just one thing. And obviously, I'd probably end up doing more than one thing. But if I wasn't having a good day, like, this is when my mental health was quite bad. If I wasn't having a good day and I only did that one thing, I knew that I'd moved the needle. And so you can use that. I know some people that do like, I'm going to put one big thing, 2 medium things, and 2 small things on my list. And that is, when you're younger, your capacity is going to be less. But I think it is just not trying to be overly ambitious and almost setting yourself up for failure at the start of the day. But I think setting intentions for the start of the day, a really nice question that I like if you are journaling or even doing a list, or even when I say journaling, it can even be like a thought journal, something to think about is, and this because I do sometimes think that productivity is too narrow a definition of like, it's all dependent on output in terms of, what we produce, literally what we produce in the world. Whereas I think if you're feeling burnt out and stressed, actually the most productive thing that you can do could be nothing. So I think I like to view productivity in that sense. And so the saying that I like to contemplate at the start of the day is, what's one thing today? What's one thing that I need to do today that would enable me to call it a good day? So if it is like, I need to send that package, or I need to send that email, or I need to make sure I do nothing. It's just a nice way of honing in your focus on what's truly important that day rather than what's urgent. And obviously, I think as a teacher, you probably have urgent and important tasks. And have you ever used the Eisenhower matrix?
No.
So Eisenhower, the president, he basically very productive, and he had this matrix. So it was, you've got tasks which are either urgent, not urgent, important or not important. And obviously most of us are putting out fires in urgent but not important. So they're things that need dealing with, but they're not really that important to our goals. What we really want to focus on is things that are important but not urgent. So let's say you're writing a book and you've got a year to write it. That's important that you start writing it and you write regularly, but it's not urgent right now. But what we tend to do is leave it until it becomes both important and urgent. And that's when we end up in a bit of bother. So, it's just one way of organizing your to-do list to be like, okay, what I really need to focus on is the important and not urgent, and obviously important and urgent. If you leave things too late, they obviously need to be dealt with. And then you've got the not important and not urgent, and they're the things that we do that you probably saying like in your shutdown process that make us feel like we're doing something, but actually make no difference to anything, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And it's just putting your tasks into a different into a set framework where you can therefore designate them, I guess, in a type of priority, and make sure that where you are spending your time. And again, that's the thing, is there's a difference between being busy and being productive. And I think a lot of people these days are busy, but not everybody is productive.
Yeah, I think there's a big difference. I quite like the idea of like starting with one thing and mastering that. And that leads quite well to habit stacking. And I quite like habit stacking. Like when I've mastered something and that's embedded and I'm okay, that feels comfortable. I don't really have to think about it. Then I'll add another habit onto the back of that. And then that's how I've built up kind of really transformed my lifestyle in the way that I kind of am. I quite like that idea of it.
It's fantastic. It takes longer, but it sticks, and I think ultimately that's what matters. This time of the year is so, people are so ambitious, and I admire that, but they just try and change so much all at the same time, and then kind of beat themselves up because it didn't work out. And it's like, well, it was never going to, and it's not because you're to blame. It's just the way that you tried to go about it is not really the best way. So I think that, one thing at a time and build is a fantastic approach. It does take a little bit longer, not a whole lot longer, but if your chances of success are higher, why wouldn't you?
They last longer, and I think that's the key. And that's the thing, isn't it? And I liked you wrote the other day about failures. Like, don't write it all off if one thing goes wrong. If you set yourself this goal and you miss one weekend or fall off the wagon or what have you, that's not going to throw off the whole year. You can still get back onto it.
Oh, 100%. Like, there's a bit of a paradox with quitting, because I think everyone's like, never quit. I don't think that's good advice. I think sometimes it makes sense to quit because, we sometimes do things for too long, because we've started or because we've invested a certain amount of time or energy into them, whereas actually it's in our best interest to quit. But on the other side of that, I think some people quit too soon because they have this, if I can't get 100% done, and you guys know with exams, right? Like the pass mark's not 100%. I mean, what percentage is the pass at the moment?
Oh gosh, it depends. I think for art, for a 4, the last one was 49 out of 96, so around 50%.
Right.
Not a maths teacher, just for
no. So
clarification.
let's call it 50%. So you can, obviously there's degrees of passing. I get that there's grades, but you can pass and still get 50% wrong, give or take. And we see that in exams, but then when it comes to behaviour change and everything, we throw that all out the window, and we're like, I've got to get it. I've got to be perfect. I've got to get it spot on. And if I miss a day, then what's the point? Well, what the point is, and I think if you're referring to that email that I wrote, like, I think I worked it out that even if you took, even if you messed up every weekend, you still end up with getting 78%. Was that right? Or 72% success rate. Now, 72% in exams, like, you take that all day long, right? Like, that's going to be a half decent grade. And yet, when it comes to our lives and behaviour change, we're like, 72, it's got to be 100% or nothing. Like, there's 366 days this year. Can you imagine if you say to yourself, like, if it's not, unless I can be perfect, I don't want to do it. You're basically saying that I have got to be spot on every day for 366 days in a row. Now, that's a big ask. And I think we just, therefore, when, we mess up, we're like, I haven't got what it takes. And there's a lot of psychology in this, learned helplessness. And I think the more we've tried something and failed, the harder it is to believe that it's actually going to be any different this time. And that's a whole different kettle of fish. I understand that. But I think for most people, they do throw the towel in too soon. And what they do is they try one way, so like, I want to lose weight. So they'll pick an exercise class and let's say they pick a diet and it fails and they're like, oh, I'm just never going to lose weight. It's like, well, no, you just chose 2 methods that don't work for you. So try again and keep trying again. And until you get to the point where there is literally nothing else to try, I don't feel that you should be quitting as long as that goal remains important and meaningful to you.
And I think it's consistency, isn't it, rather than the amount, how regularly you do it. As long as you do it and keep going, then you'll get there. I think the thing is with late weight loss or kind of exercise, is it that in 4 weeks you'll feel it, in 6 weeks you'll see it, in 8 weeks you'll hear it. Like, it's not a quick process, and I think that goes for any kind of habit. It's gonna be difficult at the start, and it's not gonna feel natural. It will take time to build up, and for you to feel that it's then a successful lifestyle change.
Yeah, and I've been thinking about this recently, and I think that there's this, and I don't know, maybe I don't know this for a fact, but I get the impression that some people believe that once you've been doing something for a prolonged period of time, that there's no more hard days, and I think that's a really unrealistic and unhelpful attitude, because I think that I was a PT for over a decade. I've been exercising in the gym for longer than that, and there are still really difficult days. And I think what people do is, because they expect it to just get easier and easier and easier until the point that it's always easy. When they come across a difficult day, they're like, "Oh, am I doing something wrong?" It's like, no, that's just the way it is. Everyone has bad days. Um, no matter how long you've been doing something, no matter how disciplined, how much willpower, how much motivation, there are going to be days when you still really don't want to do it, and if you do it, it's going to feel really hard. Um, and so when you expect that, you're not derailed by that, and you can be like, okay, well, getting it done is more. And this is the other thing: is some days, doing it is better than doing it well.
Yeah.
And I think some days, if you've only got 40% to give, and you give 40%, then that's 100% effort, right? That's all you can do on some days. But if you do that, like you say, day in, day out, or every other day, or at least consistently, you are going to make incredible progress.
I'm going to end on this one, which was messaged to me earlier in the week when I asked for a resolution. So Ali messaged in and said their resolution was to smile more, which coincides with kind of one of my new school policy, which is to smile at students, to say good morning, and to encourage them to say good morning, and you have that conversation. And I can't tell you how much it does for my well-being, even as a new teacher, wandering into school, and every morning I have kids talking to me and saying hello and asking me how I am, or just saying something. I've already pinpointed the slightly naughty children, but I've even got one of them that gives me a little wave every day in the corridors. They're mainly laughing at me because I'm lost, but I even if I'm walking around, I'm like, is this the right way to this room? And they're like, yeah. But I just think it's I think it goes back to that kindness brings you're more happy if you're kinder, and I think that goes for the children too. If we smile and are polite to children and ask them, and we expect them to respond, it's more engaging. You're getting that eye contact with them. It just creates a better kind of atmosphere at school, and I think that should be every teacher's resolution, to try and engage students in the corridor and kind of build that relationship with students, and have that positive outlook.
Yeah, we are very mimetic. There's a fantastic clip on YouTube about this. It shows you how infectious our mannerisms are. And there's this guy, somewhere in Europe, and he just starts laughing. And he's obviously a staged actor, and he just starts laughing. He doesn't pay any attention. He's got his headphones in, and he just keeps laughing and laughing and laughing. And before you know it, the whole train is laughing with him, not at him, but with him. Because and there is this, if you smile, people will tend to smile back. If you walk tall and proud, people pick up on body language, and we tend to mimic that. And I think if that smiling will create this infectious sort of response, and so it is, even if it's not smiling, even if it's like saying good morning. When you walk past someone, rather than sort of just bowing your head down and completely ignoring them, that makes a difference. I think people now have got so used to sort of being ignored. We all walk around with our headphones on and stuff. When I'm
Yeah.
out walking the dog in the morning, I sometimes say good morning, and it's almost people are like shocked, like, "Did you just say good morning to me?" Like, they don't obviously say that, but you can tell by their expression. It's like they were expecting me to just completely ignore them. And it's not a big thing, but it can have a big impact, because they might then go and say good morning to the next person they meet, and you sort of start this chain reaction of
Yes.
sort of positive things going on. So a friend of mine, he's fantastic. He's got a charity called Smiling, And his thing is every morning, walk or run a mile. No, like not every morning. Every day, walk or run a mile. Think of something you're grateful for and smile. And that's it. His whole charity is based on that simple concept of, just sort of appreciation, smiling, and getting moving. So yeah, I'm a big believer in that.
Well, thank you so much for joining me and chatting with me tonight. Maybe your New Year's resolution is to become a Teacher Talk Radio host. I did this just before Christmas last year, and it's been the best New Year's resolution that I've ever kept. So do drop Teacher Talk Radio a DM if you want to get a host pack and find out more information, because there's lots of slots available. So if you fancy giving that a go for your New Year's resolution, then do that. I will say, I think this podcast is one of the best for your staff well-being. Like, if you want to help your staff in generally making healthier decisions and keeping habits and having a nice staff well-being within your school, then do get this link to this podcast popped onto your teacher briefing notes and get people listening to it. Because I think we need to work together as a community of teachers and make sure we're looking after each other and working and not burning out and creating better habits to be able to survive the year. And don't forget, if you're going to join me on my New Year's resolution and do some more reading, our lovely sponsors over at John Catt Bookshop, you can go have a look on that website and use the code JCTTR2324 for 20% off, and have some happy reading and some good sleeping. So thank you for joining me over on Twitter or X for my first evening show, and I'll be here on Tuesdays. Thank you for listening.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.